Hi there everyone, and welcome back to another video. So, you want to start making portal modes, or you've experimented a little bit but you're struggling to get anything off the ground and it all seems a little bit overwhelming. We've all been there. Portal doesn't make it easy for beginners as there's not a lot of instructions around, it's very thin on the ground. So in this video I'm going to go over my 10 top tips for anyone that's thinking of making their own experience in Portal. After you've watched the video, why not let me know in the comments what your top tip would be when starting out with Portal. Did I cover everything? Is there anything you might add to the list for those just getting started or struggling to get started? So now, without further ado, let's crack on and let's get on with these 10 top tips for starting out using Portal to make your own experiences. So straight in with tip number 1, and remember, you don't need to use the rules editor to set up a Portal experience. Right, I know that this for most of you who are watching this is probably pretty obvious, but you'd be surprised. I do get a lot of questions about how to do certain things in the rules editor, which actually don't need to use the rules editor at all. The standard settings in Portal and the range of modes available without the rules editor being involved has expanded a lot since we first started, and as long as you don't want to reinvent the wheel, you can use those standard modes as a base and just alter the settings to suit what you need. For many modes, weapons, vehicle counts, player speed, the list goes on and on. You can set all those through the standard settings, and for many people who just want to set up a standard community server, for example, that's all you're going to need. If you don't use the rules editor, if you don't add AI to your experience either, just remember you're also going to get full XP in your server. Adding the rules editor, it does allow you to experiment a little bit more, but it does mean you're going to experience some reduced XP. And also, just while I'm here, remember you can set up a server through your mobile phone as well if you want to. As long as you're not using the rules editor, all of the settings are available through mobile phone, and I often do this when I'm setting up my weekly community server. So tip number 1, just remember, if you're first starting out, you don't need to use the rules editor to create an experience in Portal. Right then, on with tip number 2. And tip number 2 is have a plan. Okay, so this one's a bit boring, but having at least an outline plan of what you want to achieve with your experience if you're getting into the rules editor is a good idea. I've lost track of the number of times I have to ask people when they ask me for support what it is that they wanted to happen, and they find it really difficult to explain clearly what they want the mode to do. The more clearly you can describe what you want to happen in your mode, and even better if you can really break it down step by step, the easier it's going to be to write the code so it has no errors and it works the way that you want it to. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't always have an outline plan myself when I'm writing something reasonably simple, and as you become more experienced, you'll have a bunch of blocks in your head like I do that will just, to be honest, just work. But for really big experiences, you can bet that I have a plan. However, even if you're very experienced, you're gonna miss things. You're going to make small mistakes, you're going to forget that Portal has its own little quirks, and you're going to introduce errors without you thinking that you put them there. So tip number 2, build a plan. Exactly how do you want the game to work? What happens when? You don't have to follow a predefined format, you don't have to make a template, you can just write it out, you can just jot it on the back of a paper with a pen. Just make sure you know the ins and outs of what you want to achieve before you set out doing it. Save yourself a lot of heartache later. So now moving on to tip number 3, and this piece of advice is really more for people who are just starting out with the Portal rules editor, and there's a phrase that I use quite often, and it's don't try to run before you can walk. So tip number 3 is start small. Start with small experiences. Don't try and build big, complicated experiences before you've done quite a few little small ones. I get asked for advice on building modes that are really complicated from people that are just starting out. And even I'd need to sit down and think and figure out what was really needed. And the coding Portal can very quickly balloon into hundreds of lines of code. If you're inexperienced in programming, if you've no experience in Portal, some modes are just going to be too difficult for you to achieve when you're first setting out. Now, ambition's great. Some of these ideas are absolutely fantastic, but building up experience from very small ones, starting with very small ones, will help you know what you need to do to make modes work and the ins and outs of Portal. Even if you're reinventing something someone else has done, you can add your own twist. Take something small. Maybe add kill streaks to a team deathmatch mode, then extend it to add bonuses for kills, messages for when someone gets a certain amount of kills. Don't try to make the next version of a battle royale or the new control mode until you've done things small first. It's not that you're going to be unable to achieve those things eventually if you persevere. It's just that those modes need careful, detailed planning, and with more experience you'll begin to understand what you can achieve and what you can't in the framework of Portal, because there are some things that are pretty much impossible to achieve in Portal in its current state. And then you'll also learn how to build bigger and bigger experiences as you go. Right, next tip. Tip number 4. Check your code as you go. So this means don't write all of your code all at once and then test it. Now, it might seem obvious, but if you do little blocks at a time and test their work as you intended, then you can be confident that that little block of code or those blocks of code that you have written work as you want them to do before you move on. And I'll be honest, there's nothing more annoying than writing 100 lines of code only to test it and find that it just doesn't work at all. The challenge of fixing bugs, the challenge of fixing errors in all that code has just become significantly more difficult. And if you do introduce an error later on and you've been checking as you go, you'll have built up a really good working knowledge of your code. You'll know it inside out. You'll know what you've done, and finding errors is just going to be that much easier. Now, it isn't necessary to test every line at once, but once you've implemented a small chunk of code, you really want to test its error free before moving on. Right, here we are at the halfway point, and this is my tip number 5. And I'm going to throw in a little bonus tip at tip number 5, if that's okay. And this tip is, why not watch some of my videos? I've been doing these videos since Battlefield 2042 came out, actually just before, and there's already a lot of videos and guides out there. Lots for beginners to get their teeth into, along with some of the more advanced experiments that I've done along the way. And if you've made it this far into the video, a huge thank you from me. If you found it useful, then maybe you could smash the like button and consider subscribing. I've got a lot more in store for Portal this year, and it's great to have you here. Right, moving on to tip number 6. If you do use the rules editor, make sure that you organize your code well. I have seen some horrendously organized code all over the place on the screen. Very difficult to manage, very difficult to understand what is going on. So a couple of tips: name everything sensibly. So you've got variables, subroutines when you come to use them, the rules themselves. Make sure everything is named and arranged in a way that makes sense to you and identifies what that thing does. What this means for you is that if you leave it for a while and we can't build everything all at once, you're going to be able to see what each part does, and it'll act as a reminder for what you did. I place everything into sections on the screen. Initial code setup, that goes in a group. Setting up player equipment, that goes in a group all on its own. So I know where to go on the screen to find the blocks that do certain things if I want to make changes to it. There are some excellent plugins for the Battlefield 2042 Portal browser add-on, and that will help organize your code as well and make viewing it easier. More on that a little bit later on. Tip number 7, and we're coming very close to the end of this list now. I hope you're finding it useful, and that is install the Battlefield Portal browser extension. The browser extension comes with some brilliant base features, some features that are just built into it that allow you to manipulate your code, navigate it, and well, a whole lot more that you just can't do with the standard rules editor. Once you've installed it, you're also going to have access to be able to install some additional plugins that will give it even more functionality to it. Snap to a grid, browse rules by name, some advanced import and export features. Some brilliant people have written some excellent extensions for the browser plugin. I'm going to do an updated video on that shortly. I'm going to do an updated video on the browser plugins, but a huge shout out just in this video to the GitHub plugin by the Aussie, which is absolutely amazing. I'll happily shout out for that one every chance I get. Right, here we are at tip number 8. 3 more tips to go. And this one is use the error log that is built into your admin to find errors. It'll help you identify where there's an error in your code, even if it's not obvious to you. It'll give you details what the error is. It'll help you fix it. Now, it's not perfect, the error log. I'd like to be able to scroll up and down the log. If you have certain errors, the log can become really crowded very quickly. You'll see that if you look at it and you've got some errors. And again, I'm going to do another video looking in detail at how to use the error log to fix these errors. But initially, if you're working in small chunks to develop your code, you should run your experience regularly and check the error log. It'll help you identify any hiccups along the way. And now finally, we're at our last 2 tips. So tip number 9, like all programmers do, or should, comment your code. Put descriptions of what you did, what the code does, into your code as you go. So with small experiences, it's less important, but as the size of your code grows, remembering everything you did gets to be really difficult. Comments help you remember. You can use the comments feature from the Portal plugin, or you can just add a message block, drop it near the code in the code editor, and enter some text briefly explaining what that code does. This will help you remember what you did and guide you through your code later on. And now, my final tip, tip number 10. And before I do that, let me just finish by saying thank you for getting all the way to the end. If you haven't already, then I would appreciate a smash on that like button. And if you want more, I would be delighted if you join my channel by clicking that subscribe button. I've got a ton of stuff to come over the next few months. Right, here we go. Tip number 10. This is a little bit different, but I think everybody needs to hear this. You need to persevere. I'd also add, perhaps, have a little patience. Learning to use Logic Editor is actually really hard for those that are starting out. If you've little to no programming experience, you're going to find it even more difficult, but perseverance and patience will help you build bigger and better experiences over time. If you're not a programmer, along the way, you're going to learn a wide range of programming skills that will help lay the foundation if you ever found it something you wanted to do. And if you're no interested in programming and just want to make your own mode, well, it's just a pretty cool thing to be able to do, to be honest, if you ask me, but then I am a little bit biased. I think Portal's going to be around for a long time, if I'm honest. At least that's what I'm hoping, and it will definitely be supporting Battlefield 2042 content long after the official content has dried up. This community of creators who are building Portal modes will help drive 2042 beyond its official lifespan, and who knows how long that will be. The Portal community is a wonderful group of people, and I do recommend you join the Portal Discord to get to know some of them, and who knows, your experience could be the next one featured in the game. That's it for my top 10 tips. As I said at the beginning, have I missed anything? Would you add anything to this list? Is there anything that you think would be really useful for somebody starting out with Portal to know? Add it to the comments below, and until next time, I'll see you later. Take care.